I was looking at the different accounts. I had the Oreo account, and I was looking at what they were spending, and it was like $100,000 a week on marketing. And so that just, this just blew me away. I would leave work and talk to different people like, man, Oreo spending $100,000 a week on Facebook ads. Like this is crazy. So this was like
Yeah.
2016, 2017 or so.
When it comes to success, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. The journey to the top is filled with roadblocks, bumps, and U-turns. And what better way to fast-track this venture than by learning from the best? Welcome to Breaking It Down with Yogin Patel.
All right. So today we're joined by Lionell Ball, an entrepreneur, visionary, and digital marketer. Raised in Detroit, Michigan, Lionell learned early on what it's like not having the resources and access to mentors that many of us take for granted. After moving to Phoenix, Arizona, Lionell learned marketing through various classes and eventually landed a job at Facebook, where he led accounts to the likes of Oreo, Nike, and other multi-million-dollar SaaS companies. He eventually left Facebook in 2019 to start his agency, Inflect Digital, with co-founder Anurup. Everyone, welcome, Lionell.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me.
All right, my guy. Well, I really, we met, not too long ago, and I learned a lot about you in the short time that we've met. I mean, we grabbed breakfast the other day, and it was crazy how we just ran into someone that we both have known in the marketing world for so long. I want to kind of start, back when you were in Detroit, Michigan, and how you kind of learned about marketing and how your entire childhood was like. So let's start there first. If you can explain a little bit about that.
Yeah, so growing up in the inner city of Detroit, of course, early on, back to the beginning of things, I knew nothing about marketing, and then of course too, low income community where there was a lot of I guess there was a lack of access to, I would say, the different things, whether that was mentors or resources, things of that nature. And so when I actually left Detroit and moved here to Phoenix, that's when I really started to, learn different things, connect with mentors, went to school here in Phoenix, things that I didn't accomplish or do back home because, I just didn't have that environment that was conducive to those things based on just the community I grew up in at the time. I would say I was kind of like in the streets, if you will, right? And so because of that, that invited also a lot of you could say brutality. You could say trauma, just from my experiences of growing up there and doing things I shouldn't have been doing, right? Whether that's drug abuse or selling drugs, all these different things. And so that was a pretty rough upbringing, but things did change.
Yeah, it's very interesting, man. I mean, I personally grew up very, poor in the beginning. We moved from India, and it was kind of a similar start where it was rough, and then eventually things got better with my parents um, and all of that. But I think with your case, you were in Detroit, Michigan, and a lot of people don't know that the public schooling system over there is kind of, it's not the same as multiple other states, and so. Talk to me about just like growing up, and going through that entire schooling system, and how much it has affected you overall.
Yeah, so the public school system is perennially underfunded, right? So whether that's uh, qualified teachers, counselors, that kind of thing. I can remember specifically when I was in high school, where I wasn't doing too good with my grades. It was we're getting close to graduation, and my counselor called me to the office and basically let me know like, hey, the way your grades are looking, you're probably not going to graduate. And that was kind of that. And I just kind of was like, okay, like I didn't. there was no other, he didn't provide any other guidance in terms of like, okay, well, look, here's the game plan. Your grades are not looking good. Maybe you should consider some tutoring. Here are the resources that we have for you to help you get on track so you can graduate. That wasn't the conversation. It was just kind of like, hey, you're behind, you need to pick it up. And I just was, like, oh, okay. But there was, no other guidance outside of that. So really, even for me, I wasn't the kind of person neither to like ask for help. And so I think a lot of times when you grow up in these kind of, you have this kind of background where you need that kind of like that game plan, so to speak. And then I grew up, single parent household. My mom, she worked in 2 and 3 jobs, raising 3 boys at that. And so it was rough. And so with that being said, when that happened, I just kind of dropped out, as it were, and then that was that.
Got it. Um, and I guess growing up in, it like kind of around that environment, what would you say, looking back has really been something that's kind of propelled you, right? There's a lot of things in our past that when you look back on, you can pinpoint a moment where you're like, okay, if that hadn't happened, maybe I wouldn't be here now. So have there been any moments like that that you can kind of specifically, refer back to in your childhood, you would, look back and be like, oh wow, like that was, that was amazing, or maybe that was something that wasn't so great.
Yeah, so I'll cover both. I know I touched on earlier when I mentioned about growing up in a low income city and experiencing trauma or brutality, specifically police brutality. So something that wasn't so great. I remember when I was 14 years old and I was traveling with a friend, and we were just kind of just going over to another neighborhood to shoot some hoops, and we got stopped by some undercover police, and they were, like, hey, asking me about, some bad things that have been going on in the community, some robberies or what have you. I had not a clue or idea what they were talking about, but their approach was one that, hey, if you don't tell us, then we're going to tell everyone in the community that you're the one snitching. And from the community I come from, that's not the label you want to have. So that was now he didn't follow through on that threat, but it was still of a traumatizing,
Right.
experience. When I look back on it, I did, I kind of, you feel these emotions, things that you go through, but you don't totally understand them. And it seems like it's normal because it's happening on a regular basis. And so when I look back at that, I realized like, wow, this is some of the things that I was going through that was really detrimental. When we talk about a positive, I can remember a time where I'll say this, the girlfriend that I had at that time, this was later, later in life at about 18, 19, she moved to Arizona. And so I was like, well, I didn't really have too much going on. So I just kind of follow along behind her. And I'm like, I'm gonna go too, So when I left, that actually, when I look back on it, that was like probably the best decision I could have made. I'm no longer even with her. However, when I moved out here to Arizona, I was 20 at the time. By the time I had came out here, when she had got situated, and you know, I didn't had no clue what I was, going to do when I got here, or any of those things. But I was away from the environment that I grew up in, and so I didn't have any friends, etc. And so I was, I got a job, started working, 9 to 5. So now I had actually a regular paycheck, coming in. And then, from there, I also started to, like, 3 years after I was here, I went to community college. Um, and so actually not community college, but I went to a film school, which was Collins College at that time. And then after leaving college, which was a film school, I then went to Glendale Community College. So I got a lot of schooling while I was here, and certain things that I wasn't even aware of. When we talk about, again, resources and not having access, I had no idea, even of the grants, how you could, get these scholarships and different things. So these are some of the things I learned while I was here as I started to explore and open my mind up to other opportunities, and what was there. So as I started to get this knowledge and apply it, things started to change, etc.
It's interesting. So your girlfriend was really the reason and kind of the catalyst in you moving out of Detroit. Would you say that a lot of your friends and family are still back there?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Everyone, even to this day, I think about some of my friends who are still there, who I even still talk to today from time to time, but they just never left the
They never
city.
left.
It's kind of like that kind of attitude of like, oh, this is home. I'm not going anywhere, and it's really unfortunate, but so that is the case in a lot of instances.
Got it. Um, and so you were about 18 to 19 years old when you moved out to Arizona,
Yeah, yeah.
correct? And then you went out to community college. And so when I think you mentioned earlier that you started with an interest in music and film. So was that initially what you were going to school for out here?
Yes, yeah. So growing up in Detroit, I was big on the music scene and so forth. Was really buying our own studio equipment and doing things in our basement, things of that nature. And so when I moved out here to Arizona, which is it's interesting how your life play out when you really get to reflecting. Because so I started out really involved in music. I learned how to write. I would write all the time. So thousands of raps I probably had, thousands of songs. And then when I
Wow.
actually got here and went to school, I went to film school, not music. I had developed the interest in film, and so I went there, and it was fun. It was exciting, but I didn't fully end up fully pursuing it. I dropped out of film school and went to school for audio engineering, and that's where I graduated with my applied science of audio degree. And so that was kind of like that, the pathway, so to speak. And then while I was in both schools, I was learning about marketing in some of those classes and so forth. So that was the first thing that piqued my interest. So, I always knew obviously you got to market, but never really looked at it from a business lens. But then after those experiences with my course studies, that's what exposed me to that.
Got it. And what was kind of your first, I guess, segue into marketing? Whether it was, back in school, it could have been a project, but what was that first thing that kind of caught your attention?
It was when I was in my music business class, and we had to put together a project, and we had to, set up an event, and it was downtown Phoenix, where we on like a business Saturday, first business Saturday, or something of that nature, and I had to, market that whole thing to get traffic to the, people to the event, etc. And that was the first thing that kind of had me like, okay, this is interesting. Developing those marketing materials, the design, etc.
Yeah,
And so that was one of the first things that like piqued my interest there.
piqued your interest. Um, and then kind of going from there, so you graduated, or so yeah. So talk to us about that process. You went through the school? Did you graduate, or did you get the job right after? Talk to us about
No,
that.
I no, I did graduate. I graduated in 2014, and
2014.
then
Okay.
yeah, and then of course from there I was doing my music thing and was going down that path. And then I had actually a friend of mine who actually I graduated with. He went there too. And later on, he told me about Facebook. He had got a job at Facebook, and so that I was curious because I remember growing up, I always used to think, how do they make money? I never had that insight on like how do they make money. But of course, as we got older, we like, oh, okay, it's the advertising piece and so forth. A lot of
Yeah.
companies, businesses use their platforms for that. And so he the one that told me that they were hiring, and eventually, so I ended up getting a job at Facebook as an account manager. So that's where the shift happened, where I just went full blown on the marketing piece.
Marketing piece. So initially, I mean, when you got your job, did you have any idea, what Facebook was doing, at least on the advertising side, and to the extent of how big this entire thing was?
I did not. I mean, when people share things with you, right? You're like, oh, okay, that's what they do. but you don't until you get in there and and you see it with your own eyes. That's what just blew me away when I saw it with my own eyes. So
Yeah.
I remember, when I went in and we were, I was looking at the different accounts. I had the Oreo account, and I was looking at what they were spending, and it was like $100,000 a week on marketing. And so that just,
Wow.
that just blew me away. I would leave work and talk to different people, like, man, Oreo spending $100,000 a week on Facebook ads. Like this is crazy. So this was like
Yeah.
2016, 2017 or so. But yeah, so that just, so that's when I really was like, okay, if I'm consulting these agencies and high level entrepreneurs about how Facebook algorithm works, the machine learning, etc., then I can start my own agency because I saw some opportunities there.
Right. So kind of sticking with that Facebook piece. I mean, it's such a big company, and you got exposed to such high level, entrepreneurs like you mentioned, and even just Fortune 500 companies. What are some of the key learnings you had, or maybe specifically a project that you were assigned to, that when you were first tasked, you thought was really challenging, and then you were able to kind of break through.
Yeah, I remember I had this event based company. And he was really, adamant about, getting certain results, which, rightfully so. Um, and I had got this client. I was fairly new. So I was still learning from a lot of my peers, there and getting help, like, hey, what should we do? How should we optimize this, etc. So, it's some challenging things, especially when you have a client and you need to get them results. You want them to pick up the phone when you call. So
Yeah.
I definitely had to make sure that I had turned things around for him. And so I pitched this idea, because he wasn't doing, this was early on, 5, 6 years ago, and he wasn't really focused on video yet. He was having a tough time getting video from the entertainers that he was hiring for his shows. And that was one of the ideas I really just went in on, like, look, we have to do this. I know we need to you have a certain expectation, and in order to reach that expectation, this is what we're going to have to do. And so eventually he took that advice. He got some new content, some videos and different things. And I shared with him how to, like, have the artist, how to speak to, hey, we're going to be here on this date, etc. And when he implemented that and we got those creatives back and we implemented the campaign, I told him how you can looking at your data, you got so many people that have added to cart, but they didn't purchase. So, I was teaching him how to target these people specifically while also excluding people that already purchased. So you're not wasting your advertising dollars on people that already bought from you, etc. And so really pinpointing those kind of things. And then from there, his results, like, was just went through the roof. And so he was super excited about that. I was, of course, excited about that. And it really, the relationship flourished, as it were. People always say results cure all. I heard someone say results cure all, and that's something I live by these days. Results cure all.
I love that. I love that. What was he exactly selling? So, yeah, explain that a little bit.
Yep. So he was selling his demographic was like 65 plus because he sells
Mm,
shows basically. So concerts to like, think Don Felder, Hotel California, he's known for that song. A lot of and also the 50s and the 60s, a lot of, primarily the Don Felder is a little bit younger, maybe in the 55, so forth, but his primary demographic is other artists that he booked for his shows out in California. And so that was the demographic, 65 plus, selling shows to a concert, and kind of going from there.
I like that. Yeah, I mean, it just shows you like the overall landscape of Facebook and the ability to use the platform for any industry. You wouldn't necessarily think of an event-based industry immediately for Facebook ads, but there you go. I mean, that's a perfect use case scenario where you're trying to drive concert sales, and you're running programmatic buys on Facebook. Um, what do you have for as far as examples, maybe even on the D2C and e-commerce side? Because we have a ton of people that are starting their own brands. Whether it's clothing lines, jewelry, and all that. So, do you have any examples up there?
Yes, and one thing I want to share too is, I always think about the holistic view. The like, how are things looking overall? Because I know we were talking about Facebook right now, because that's where, that was like my calling card, because I worked at Facebook, so Facebook and Instagram. But when we think about it holistically, so whether it's Google, YouTube, Pinterest, Snapchat, whatever platform it may be, you want to look at that. Like, so the acquisition drivers, I'm going to say Google, Facebook, Instagram. And then you have your brand awareness, or your discovery channels like YouTube, TikTok, etc. And then we don't want to forget about retention, like our emails and our SMS, right? So that's like that holistic view. And then you have all of your assets. So let's think about your website, your Facebook profile, your IG handle, whatever it may be. And now those assets that you have, that especially your website, you want to share that data with Facebook, so they know what's happening. Like, they know your sales motion. So this, I'm talking about your e-commerce brand right now, for example. Let's start there. So we have one client who, e-commerce, direct to consumer, and he never had ran Facebook ads, Instagram, YouTube, any of those things before. He was really doing things organically, and I want to give him credit, because he did all the legwork, right? So when he came to me, my company, Inflect Digital, me and my business partner, Anna Root, we were super excited, because we were like, wow, this is, a great opportunity, because we knew what we could do. Like, we could enhance what he had already done. And so from there, so I want to mention too, it's a guy named Clive, I want to say it's Clive Humby, and he's a British mathematician, and he one coined the
Mm.
term "data is the new oil," right? And so he had this client, he had all this data, from his Shopify store. And so we were able to take all those purchases that he had had in the past. He was doing seven figures, and we loaded that email list into Facebook, so that we can, use that data to optimize the ads. So even though it was a brand new ad account, we had like a head start in that sense. And this is just transparency, because like a lot of times you'll hear people talk about their results, but not tell you why they got those results, or what was the whole process there. So also connecting the API with Shopify API with Facebook API, so they can communicate beyond the pixel level, right? Because we all know about iOS 14 and 15, those updates and tracking issues, etc. But anyway, we taking this all of those things into perspective, and then having like a mapping hierarchy with these different things. We took all that information, we had the data sharing in place across all the assets, and we spent less than $8,000 and made 100,000 within 30 days. And so that's the power of like Facebook ads, and those technicalities,
Wow.
that holistic view, holistic tracking, data sharing, etc. Data really is the new oil. We talk about marketing in this sense.
I like that. Because a lot of people don't really talk about what it's like to start a brand new ad account. And I like what you said, that, sometimes you already have a brand that has, a ton of data points, customers, and you can just upload that list onto a specific advertising platform like Facebook, Snapchat, Google, and start there, right? And have that head start, like you mentioned. What do you recommend? I mean, for a brand that doesn't have anything like that, what are some things that a brand can do to leverage the capabilities of media buying?
Absolutely. So, having these structures, these modalities, if you will, when it comes to Facebook ads, these metaphors, this media buying, um, what you could do is you're gonna have to test, because no matter whether you got a lot of data or not a lot of data, you're still gonna be testing. And so for someone who's coming, just totally fresh. And I'll give an example of a SaaS company that we work with. Now they're already a seven-figure brand. However, what they came to us for was a new product launch that they did not have any data for. And it was a totally different demographic. And so it was still a start fresh situation. There was no data to upload because this new product that they had no customers for. So what we did was we just did a lot of testing. We had to test different landing pages and say, okay, they had three different tiers. They had a free tier and then two paid tiers. And we noticed, even though we were optimized for sales and drive them to this landing page with these three tiers, most of them will opt into the free tier, right? And so from there, we said, okay, well, and plus the CPAs were crazy through the roof because again, it was new, etc. And so what we did then, we said, okay, well, let's test the landing page without the free option and just do the paid option, right? The CPAs started to come down, started to get a little bit of better delivery as we changed the messaging, different things like that. Had some new creatives that we used. They would do this "Ask Me Anything" kind of video where they would have people hop on for free, and so we'll take that video and run ads with it. But even then, we wasn't really at that optimal goal. So then it became a thing of, okay, well, we have this new feature that we have it was a phenomenal new feature, and so we said, well, let's implement this feature on a paid tier so that in order for them to get it, they have to get the paid tier. We had a bunch of free resources that we would use too, different templates so this was in the nonprofit space as well. So how do you start a nonprofit? How do you find, funders, like all these different things. And so we would take these how-to templates and say, hey, download this for free. That way we get their email, their phone number, their contact information. Now we can do a sequence in HubSpot with the email marketing. So anyone that opt in, now they're getting information from us on a regularly. Eventually, they'll sign up. And so there may be that longer cycle when you're starting fresh because you don't have any customers to go off of or to start with. And then you have to have this kind of long cycle approach and figure out what's working, what's not, and then optimize and scale that.
Got it. Got it. Having been at Facebook, what can you kind of explain about the overall like algorithm? And I believe it's the same type of algorithm being used across multiple different platforms. And I think you having worked there can give us some context overall as how people should take their approach when it comes to media buying and overall just running ads on multiple platforms and the digital landscape. So what can you say there?
Yeah, I would say, even before we get there, you want to know who your customer is, who is your avatar. So you really want to dial that in. Who are they? What's the age? What are they
Mm.
watching? Where do they shop? Where do they spend their time? What books are they reading? Who are the authoritative figures in their life? Who do they like look up to, so to speak? Who do they follow, right? All those different things so you can really figure out those nuances of who your customer is so that you can make sure you're getting in front of the right people. When it comes to the Facebook ads, you want to make sure you have all of your analytics set up before you run an ad because that's how you're going to know what's working, what's not working, right? So, and then two, letting the algorithm decide what's working best in terms of the creative. For example, you may have a great idea for a creative and say, I know this is going to work. I love this video or whatever it may be. But you want to test multiple creatives because you just never know. So I got a question not too long ago about, should we use videos or should we use images? Is it cheaper to use images instead of videos? What do you think? All these different things. And it's like the algorithm is very smart. It can crunch numbers like you wouldn't believe, right? So you just take those creatives, take the images and the videos, put them on, and see which one gets, the leaning as far as the budget, because Facebook is going to spend the budget based on the creative that's getting the best results. So I would say, you want to trust the algorithm, but you also want to,
Mhm.
hawk those things, because it could be that sometimes Facebook don't even give other creatives a chance. So you do have to have that balance in terms of maybe you're gonna just isolate some creative. If you really feel in your gut that you really want to give this creative a chance and it didn't get a chance because Facebook, attributed all of the budget to another creative, then you can pull those creatives out in a separate campaign to test them over there. So I just had that experience recently, so I wanted to bring that out. And it was the image. It was the image that crushed it for this particular client over the video. So it was interesting. And so too, think about your campaign structure. Right now, I know a lot of people talk about, should we use asset budget? Should we use campaign budget? All those different things. You want to follow Facebook's best practices. So, like when it comes to campaign budgets and so forth, I would say definitely you want to, test that. But if you want to test, it's not like a either or. You can test both and then look at the results, and that's going to tell you, okay, I actually saw diminishing returns or uh, not that many sales when I did it this way versus that way. So that's what I would suggest there.
I like that explanation because I think Facebook is so complicated. Everyone's looking for a simple fix answer to how to scale their ad campaign to millions of dollars, right? But it's really not that simple. There is so many different complex testing you have to do. What can you say in your years of experience just media buying? What are some things and maybe trends that you have seen, or would you say that really there's nothing? I mean, you just constantly have to test.
Yes, I would say, there are some nuances you do constantly have to test. So for example, one thing I'm delving into now, this is a current test, for example, is we had a very broad lookalike audience, and we were spending like $1,000 a day on this particular audience. And I mean, some days it would, do really well, and then some days it didn't. So it's like this ebb and flow. And so you want to, it's not gonna do great every single day, but you want to look at averages. So over the past 7 days, make sure you cover in the half life, because you got to think, when a person see my ad, are they in the mindset to buy, right? Right at that moment, maybe not. So you got to think about those different modalities, whether it's impulsive, or your ad may get in front of someone who's methodical, and you want to make a logical decision, not necessarily an emotional one. So they have to think about it. So they may not buy the buy the product or whatever it may be on the first touch. And so, but they may buy within 7 days, or within whatever that whatever that buying cycle looked like for you, depending on the product, right? Um, let's say, for example, if it's a car, right? I'm
What
gonna
what
take a
what's a
lot
good
more.
uh, what's a good campaign structure you would recommend?
Yeah. So campaign structure. We're testing a bunch of different things. So generally, I would do, so if I have my cold audience, my cold prospects, I'll take those individuals and say, hey, I'm going to do a lookalike off of 1%, lookalike off of, 3%, etc. I may decide to put that in the campaign budget and let the algorithm decide, where to allocate that budget. But sometimes, because the audiences are bigger than the other audiences within that same campaign, you may see a leaning toward the bigger audience. So sometimes I like to really break them out first and just see on their own how they perform.
Cool. So yeah, can you like just start walk us through once you moved back to Arizona, or once you moved to Arizona, what was it like and where did you kind of start?
Yeah, so once I got here to Arizona, I started working a 9 to 5, which I had never done before, but because I was in a new environment, away from people that I knew, I had to do something different, right, than what I was doing before. So I got a job, and from there, I mean, I did really well. There was like a sales job, selling like BMG music subscriptions of all things, and from there, once that kind of fizzled out, if you will, where I just wasn't feeling like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. Now I'm ready to like explore other opportunities. This is where I went to school. I started to go into film school. Actually, someone who I met at the job was telling me about this great film school over in Tempe, Arizona. And so I decided to attend. And then there I met some really fine individuals in terms of like what they were doing in the film industry, doing short videos and different things like that. And so I started to work with them. We created a short film called Forgiven. It was about a young man who grew up in a certain kind of community and did things that he probably wouldn't have done had he not been in that particular circumstance. And I kind of really related to the video as if it was me, as a person who grew up in a rough community, started getting involved in activity that, was just a norm, that seemed like the normal thing to do, being where I was at, and then actually getting out of that, and being forgiven, so to speak, because you've now chose to go down a different path. You found the light, so to speak, for, the cliche. But so that short film that we did, I really resonated with the character. And so we did that. But I ended up dropping out of film school because I didn't want to fully commit to that particular thing that I was doing, though I was having fun. I said, I kind of went back to my grassroots, if you will, which was music. And so I went and enrolled in audio engineering course at Glendale Community College, and I graduated from there. I saw that all the way through, attained scholarships and grants, and was on all the different school boards in terms of the clubs, like, student government. I was VP of service in the Phi Theta Kappa club, and was able to go on many different trips. I actually went on a trip where in Phi Theta Kappa, where they sent us to Tennessee to hear keynote speaker Malcolm Gladwell. And wow. So that was a really good treat. So this is where I'm really getting exposed to new opportunities, different environments, different social structures, if you will. And so that really started to, be the impetus behind me pursuing, education and doing those different things. And I graduated in 2014 and continued with the music, doing the studio thing, connecting with artists so that they can be able to record their music and, package it, etc. And so I stuck with that for a while. And then in some of my courses in school, I had these marketing classes, which I never really looked at from a business lens. But after, being in school, we had one project where we had to, put together a show, as it were, downtown Phoenix on a business Saturday. And so I had to market that in order to get people there and so forth. And so that was really fun and exciting. So that was like the first taste of like, oh, okay, this is how you drive traffic. Because I was, designing different materials. And then from there, actually, one of my peers who I went to audio school with, he ended up landing a job at Facebook. And so he told me about that, and it was about the marketing and, the crazy money people were spending on ads. And I always was curious about how does Facebook make money. And so as I started to get enlightened on that, I actually took him up on the offer and went for an interview. Long story short, I did eventually get a job there at Facebook. And so that's when I really got exposed to the marketing side of things and what was really going on behind the scenes.
I love that, man. Because, when we first started talking, you explained how, in Detroit, there wasn't really the resources and mentors available to you. So when you actually got out to Arizona, you were able to utilize everything, available, right? There was, people that you can go talk to. There was, the classes that you could take, and really just get an outside perspective on everything going on in the business world.
Absolutely.
And so what would you say kind of landed you into that Facebook role, and kind of walk us through that process of going, getting the job and then eventually kind of being in the weeds at Facebook, not knowing how big of a company this is and what you're dealing with on the advertising side of things.
Absolutely. I think those experiences in school really kind of brought me out of my shell, if you will. I was, what you may call timid or shy, that kind of thing. I kind of stayed to myself. But I think that had to do with just my experience growing up in Detroit and having to be very careful and, not always feeling safe, that kind of thing. And so as I got out here and I entered in these different schooling and got access to different resources and mentors, Dr. Tyrone Blesso was one of my mentors. He ran a organization called SOB, Student African American Brotherhood. And so some of the, trips we would go on, he would have these, different speakers come. And so anyway, I started to really have these mentors learn and come out of my shell, be more of a social butterfly, if you will. So I started to blossom in that sense. And so when I went to Facebook, I kind of had already developed all these skill sets in terms of, connecting with people, building relationships, that kind of thing. And so being at Facebook did require that, because as an account manager, I had a book of business of like 150 clients, different accounts. And so that did require those skill sets to be able to connect with people. When you're making these phone calls, why would people want to pick up and talk to you, right? Because you would need something valuable to talk about and be able to, get them, interested. And also they see that you have their best interests at heart. And this is me speaking in hindsight in a sense, because, at first when you get there as an account manager, a lot of times people don't want to pick up the phone because they think that you may just give them some random strategy on how to optimize their Facebook ads. So they don't
100%.
find any value in that. And so I think, all the skills that I developed through school and these mentors, like you say, these resources that I then had, I learned a lot of different things. I remember when I had to write like I was trying to get a grant or scholarship from Coca-Cola, and I ended up attaining that for Leaders of Promise, but I had to develop a skill set of fine tuning my writing and different things like that. So all those things, when you got to write emails to these different clients and get them to open your email, then you need to be able to provide value. And so those skill sets really that I developed in this process, when I landed the job at Facebook, then, I was able to, implement those skills into what I had to do there.
Yeah. It's interesting because, obviously I've been approached by, Facebook, marketing success managers, or not sure exactly the title. And you're totally right. There are a lot of people that just give you a very cookie cutter, plan. And so, I talk to a lot of colleagues in the e-commerce space, and, a lot of them say like, hey, I don't even schedule a call with those guys because, I'm just going to be wasting my time. So it's really interesting, hearing your perspective, because you were assigned some really big, names, and you were really leading the strategy behind a lot of those accounts. So it's like on your end, you were really moving the needle. And, obviously there are account managers that probably don't know nearly as much. And so you actually had the experience. So kind of talk us about, some of those accounts that you were managing and the things that you learned.
No, yes, absolutely. And that's one of the things that I learned too, while I was there, because, we're talking about Facebook, but you really needed to have a holistic understanding of just marketing, right? So even though you were not managing their email campaigns or their Google campaigns and different things of that nature, I was at least able to speak to that. Like, hey,
based on what you're seeing here, but what are you seeing over here on this? Because then that opened their mind like, oh, okay, he's not just, he understands the holistic view of what they're trying to accomplish, as it were. So the accounts that I had, the clients that I work with, they really appreciated, me for that. And I would go into the weeds. Like, I really spent time on their account and looked at, hey, look, this campaign right here that you have is, getting, a 3x, but you're spending less money on it. And on the campaign that you're spending, more money on, you're only getting a 2x or whatever it may be. But what I understood is that as a business owner, you have so many different things on your plate that you need that fresh pair of eyes. Sometimes some things just kind of slip through the cracks. It's not that they don't know what they're actually doing, but it's just that they're doing so much. And so having a dedicated rep that will really take the time to look at your account and give you a custom strategy on how to move the needle, that would really, endear them to me in that sense. So I had another client who, he was spending a lot of money. I mean, these guys, he's spending 50K, 100K a month, and he wasn't getting the return that he was looking to get based on all the money that he was spending. And I gave him some ideas around his creative strategy, because it may not be just the tactics that you're using within the ad account. Like, hey, make sure you're excluding your purchases when you're targeting your add to cart audience, or make sure you're excluding your add to cart audience if you're just trying to get to people who hit did a certain intent on your website, took a certain action. And so outside of that, though, what about the creative side of it? What actually get people to click on your ad? Are you telling a story? Are you really talking about the value that the service or product is going to provide? Are you using testimonials? All these different things play a part within your strategy to make sure, you're closing the sale at the end of the day. So with the creative approach that I've shared with many clients, that actually was the thing that drove the needle or moved the needle for them in that sense.
So walk us through maybe a challenge that you experienced while you were at Facebook, and potentially an account that you were managing. How did you navigate that, and what's some insight you've learned?
Yeah. So who do I want to use for this example? There's quite a few. I want to use a company. They were, I don't want to mention their name, but they were, they had a product that they were using that basically fans at a sporting event would use. It was, something that they would use at the event, kind of like a poster, if you will, but not exactly. And, they were having some trouble with their account, and things just wasn't looking good. And we had tried so many different approaches to where it was like, okay, so what do we do now? So I really had to, in this case, ask for help. There was, I have all my peers, I would reach out to them like, hey, here are some of the challenges this account is having with, getting sales, right? What do you think we can do? We've tried all these different things. And so I would get feedback from my peers or even managers. And that also, when I did that, the client appreciated it, because they knew that, okay, I'm really trying to figure out what we can do to, turn things around, if you will. So this particular client was losing money when they were assigned to me, once I had got them. And we had tried a few things that didn't, rebound for them. And so at that point, we decided, okay, look, let's go back to the basics, so to speak. We were doing very specific targeting. And so we said, let's just go ahead and broaden this. Let's broaden the scope on the targeting, and just let the algorithm do its thing, so to speak. Brought in some new creatives. We did some dynamic creatives We use that particular tool, the dynamic creative tool, to let the algorithm also decide, okay, which creative is going to really move the needle on these campaigns. So going broad, using the dynamic creative tool, those kind of things, just trying to just basically pulling all the stops, as it were, right, to see like what's working here. Because what we're doing right now with this specific targeting 1% lookalike audience, it's generally that's the thing. Like and I'm glad we're talking about this, because a lot of times, that's the way to go. A 1% lookalike audience is basically 1% of the people. This is the closest to your sales audience, right? These people match your sales audience the closest, right? Versus a 2, 3, 4, so forth, so on. And so you generally say, hey, let's do a 1% lookalike audience and let's go there. But in this particular case, it was the 10% lookalike audience that actually drove the needle for this particular client. So I think it's one of those things where we mentioned earlier, I think we touched on about testing and just having to keep testing and see what works for you. And that's why it's not good, what you mentioned earlier, with a cookie cutter approach where you read something off a blog and you decided to use that strategy where you don't know what this business, why that worked for them, and if it would work for you. And so you have to focus on like what's working within your ad account, and what's not working, and go from there. So that was a interesting challenge, but the 10% lookalike audience is what picked it up for them.
I love that, man, because I personally ran my own ad accounts, and and I've talked to other colleagues that in the e-commerce space, whether they got their start drop shipping or whatever, they would see a brand really scaling on Facebook, and then they'd be like, okay, let me just create a store similar to that and start running ads, and copy their exact advertising creatives and all that, and expect to see the same results. And what's in reality, you actually get worse results. And so it's really interesting that you touched on that point. Is you have to look at each case individually, and take it for what it's at.
Exactly. Depending on what stage the business is at. And even today, I mean, I know things have changed a lot. And if you're doing really well and you have the budget, maybe then, drop shipping still work for some people, but a lot of the drop shipping people got crushed, and Facebook was really cracking down on, a lot of times it was these long delivery times that was really causing issues, and customers wasn't happy. And so now Facebook, they do a score. They score the app, not just when you make the sale, but post sale, all those different things. They'll send surveys out, to users. Hey, you saw this ad. Did you ever get your product? Or when did you get your product? What was your experience? So if you get a low quality score on that, then now within Facebook's ad auction, you're being suppressed based on a low quality score. Not just, you may have a bigger budget. You may be spending, $5,000 a day, and I'm only spending $1,000 a day, but my product is great. My customers are happy. I'm gonna rank higher in the auction versus someone who has a bigger budget but a low quality score because of their customers not happy. And so at that point, you start seeing those diminishing returns to where you're not making no money and you just have to stop because it's not working for you anymore. Now you got to try something else.
Yeah, it's funny because the quality score matters so much, even with your cost per action, right? What would you say are some key like trends or insights you've learned just managing, hundreds of millions of dollars in ad spend? What are some things that you've learned over those years?
I would say one of the key things, and I want to speak in terms of current, like you said, trends when we have these tracking issues with the Apple and the Facebook beef, these iOS updates, the delayed attribution, you really have to factor that in before turning off a campaign. When this first happened, I was personally, I can be honest and say I was turning off campaigns prematurely. And because it looked like it just wasn't doing well, it would be like a 0.7. Like this particular campaign is like a 0.7. So not even getting your money back. And you're like, what is going on? So you turn it off. 2 days later, or 3 days. In some cases, it was even 24 hours. All of a sudden, it's like, oh, 5 sales just got attributed back to that particular campaign. And now that campaign is not a 0.7, it's a 3.5, So what I learned is, even when you're doing all of the UTMs and the tagging and you're doing your due diligence, things can still slip through the cracks. And so what I do now is, just because it had a bad day doesn't mean that I need to turn it off. I'll just leave it going, take the hit, and see what happens. And a lot of times what I've seen happen is that it actually was doing well, and continues to do well. But it's gonna have its bad days or bad few days. But you may want to ride it out and see what happens.
What's your criteria in, starting a campaign before, you assess to keep it going or turning it off? What are some metrics you look at?
72 hours.
72 hours.
Yep. So 72 hours. Yep. So when I start a campaign, I'm looking at the delivery. What is it costing me? What's the CPMs looking like? I'm looking at the click-through rate, to see, okay, are people clicking? They're going through it and so forth. And one of the main key ingredients to look at is that even if you don't get any sales, are you still getting some intent-based activity? Meaning you got 6 add to carts and 3 initiate checkouts, but no purchases. So it's like, okay, but people are clicking through the delivery I'm comfortable with. And there's some intent based activity happening, meaning there's some add to carts, there's some initiate checkouts, even though no one purchased yet. Maybe some of those checkouts are just going to be delayed and are going to be purchases tomorrow or the next day. And so I wait those 72 hours and I look at those metrics to see, is there any intent-based activity happening on that campaign.
Got it. And do you look at the amount of spend, right? Because in 72 hours, you could have a campaign spending $10 a day, but you're selling a product that's, a couple $100. So what do you look at as far as that goes?
No, that's a good question. In that case, you would go longer. I'm generally, with the accounts that I'm managing, we're spending, maybe a minimum of $50 a day. So that 3-day is a good benchmark. But if you're only spending, $10, $15 a day, 20, then let's just put a number on it and say, once you get to that $150 mark, with that campaign, or that $100 mark, then you should have a good idea on whether or not you want to keep that going.
And do you look at the average order value of that particular ad account, or any of those other things, right? Because I feel like, when you're selling a product that might be for $20 compared to a mattress, right? The testing also changes too, right?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Yes, you want to look at the average order value, because that's going to give you, those are your indicators of like, okay, what's really going on here. You get the mind frame of the customer, like, oh, okay, they're not just adding one thing, or they're adding multiple things, or if you, depending on how much the product is too, like you just mentioned. If it's a product like a mattress, I mean, that could be hundreds, or in some cases thousands, if you're getting a whole shebang there. So that buying cycle, that half-life may be a week and a half or 2 weeks, for something like that. Or we think about a car, even, for example. I mean, before I pull the trigger, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks go by before I actually, that's when you have to then, take the data that you are getting and import that into Facebook. Take that offline data and import it, so you can know, oh, they saw my ad a week ago and they just now purchased something, because that's another update, right, with Facebook, where it's they're only giving you that 7-day window now. We used to have a 28-day window, which that just went away not too long ago. So if your buying cycle is longer than 7 days, you have a whole different set of criteria to think about, and that's it.
What are you doing right now with everything going on with iOS And how are you explaining that to potential clients you bring on, or anyone you're really talking to in the space? Having been at Facebook, I'm sure you've learned a lot about how these updates work and what it means for the end client. So I'd be curious to kind of hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so the main thing is your source of truth is your store. So you know what you're making. Now, what's being attributed to the campaigns and Facebook or Google, what have you, that's something that you're gonna have to watch and look at and determine, okay, what's the effectiveness of the ads based on what's being attributed. So you want to watch those things, but you obviously you want to stay glued in on your Shopify store, whatever storefront you have, and look at, like, for example, I'll give a real time review. There's an account that we have where we're looking at, okay, before iOS, right? Before iOS, we looked at those dates in Shopify and said, okay, how much money did we make within this particular time frame? For this particular account, it was like 388 some thousand for the 30-day run. And then right now we're at like a 16-day mark in comparison, 17-day mark. And it's at like 193, right? So it's like you look at those numbers and it's about equal almost. But if you times that 193 by 2, you're gonna be making a little bit more than what you did, or right around the same amount. But how much did you spend? So now you look at your channels and say, well, during that same time frame though, I spent, or during this time frame, I spent actually $5,000 more than I spent last time. And so now you know that, okay, there are some diminishing returns happening. So what else can I do to kind of close up some gaps or get better efficiency? Because I'm making about the same, but I'm spending more to make the same. So look at those numbers and see where you're at with that.
Got it. Got it. Now, what was your kind of like trigger point to, realize that, hey, I want to start doing this on my own and providing clients, some real results outside of working, at a corporate job. When was that time and what was that trigger?
Yeah, so this is a great question. When I think about it, of course, when we look back, I always had that entrepreneurial drive since the day I can remember growing up in Detroit. I almost want to say that, this sense of control, you always want to have that sense of control. And I wonder, I got to go see my therapist, but I wonder if, the environment that I grew up in really actually makes for entrepreneurs, because you didn't want that sense of control because you didn't have it, but you wanted to have it, or even you claimed that you had it, but you really didn't. It was more so like a, what some sociologists call a cool pose, where it's like, or you're acting like something that you're really not. So, but you want to appear in control. And so, that's just me kind of reflecting and thinking like, I always wanted to have my own business because I felt like now I would have the control over like my time or this or that. So anyway, that's just a sidebar in terms of, I wonder what kind of, is there any correlation there? But the trigger is, I did always want to have I want to create my own schedule. I want to move how I want to move. I don't want to be in this, this structured, like maybe I don't want to work Monday through Friday from 8 to 5, right? Maybe I want to work Monday, Wednesday, Saturday, and Sunday from you know what I mean? So I want to be able to choose. I want to have that optionality around my work life balance, etc. And so once I got the opportunity, once I hit a certain threshold financially, I said, you know what, I'm in a position to where I can leave, start my own thing. And so I think the trigger was already there. It was just a matter of when am I going to get to that level financially to be able to make that type of decision.
Got it. So the trigger was always there in the back of your head. You always knew there was a moment that would come where you would eventually leave. Um, what was it like in the early months, after having left Facebook? Did you have clients already that you knew that would work with you? Or did you have to really do that outreach process?
Right. And I'll add something too as I think about this. Now, the trigger. I had bought my home in 2016, and over those 3 years, the I guess the equity just was really high. It was nice, and so and then prior to leaving Facebook, there was a lot of deaths, like in my family. Like my uncle had died. You know, friends that I had lost their child. So there was a lot of that happening that was weighing on my mind, like, with these things. And then I was looking at the fact that, oh, wow, maybe I can sell my house. This will give me opportunity to kind of take a step back and, really think about what I want to do and so forth. And so I guess with all of those things happening and having the opportunity of that, that was like, you know what, life is short. You never know. I'm gonna go ahead and pull the trigger. I'm gonna take this risk because, um, life is short, as we say, cliche. But so that I wanted to add that to that trigger
I like
question,
that.
as it were. So when you say so what was it like in the beginning? Well, I left in August of 2019, and so I was, ready, eager, excited, and so forth. And we did not have clients right off the back. It was just kind of one of those things where I know I had a nice pot of cash that I could, I knew I was comfortable with how much time I thought it would take before, I would get a nice portfolio, if you will. And so, we picked up like, maybe 2, 3 clients early on, but nothing major. And I'll say this because when we first started the business, the idea was that, look, we have a skill set, like, all that we know, all that we've accomplished, and we know what people are spending. We know that it works. We're seeing it with our own eyes, right? So we had the idea that, hey, we're gonna cast that wide net because, our services can help anyone. And we created a program for like $500, and we're gonna create this system, for you. We wasn't gonna manage your ad, but we're gonna create a system, at least teach you over the course of 4 weeks. You would get 4 calls with it. We had this whole thing that we were thinking, and we were marketing it, and we picked up a few clients with it, but we realized that we didn't get, the response we thought we were. And when I think about it and reflect on it, I say it's because we undervalued ourselves. And I think when you undervalue yourself, you also lose out on the clients who actually may feel, hey, you undervaluing yourself, maybe you'll undervalue me. That's just the way I'm thinking about it now as I reflect. And so then COVID hit. So I started August 2019, now December 2019, COVID, etc., all these different things. I had got an office, right? End up having to let that go because of COVID and, all these different things. But it gave me an opportunity to quickly regroup because then we said, okay, let's target a specific niche, if you will. And when I started to look at our later clients in our portfolio, 80+% were Black women founders. And so then I said, that's interesting. So that happened organically. But then we said, okay, this is our focus. This is our customer. This is our demographic right here, right? And so we then started to get into communities, tech startups. We went to TechCrunch, developed some relationships with some VCs, partnered with a firm out of Atlanta, developed a really great relationship. They referred their biggest portfolio company client to us, was a Black women founder. So we were like, oh, here it is again, showing up. And so we just focused on Black founders. Now, of course, we do have men entrepreneurs, Black founders as well that we service. And so so that's what I started to focus on, and then that's when we really started to blossom afterwards. So that was, the trajectory there.
I like how you said you started really seeing success when you started niching down. Because a lot of entrepreneurs start and they're starting so broad in general and they don't really ever see success. So the fact that, you were like, okay, this is the target clientele I want to go after. These are the guys that I'll be able to, help and make successful the most. So it's really amazing that you figured that out.
Absolutely. No, thank you.
Yeah. And so, you started, like you mentioned, in the midst of COVID. What was that like? And, what type of results and what were you seeing? I mean, this was in the catastrophic period of time.
Yeah, it was the initial shock, right? It was an initial shock. So things didn't like go well in that first, so let's say, by February of 2020, March 2020, it was not, it was not in a good place. It was like, people were not knowing what's going to happen. Some people were pulling a lot back on their marketing budget. We had an event-based client who was doing concerts, right? So that didn't make sense. At the time, we actually kept pushing it because we didn't know. We were like, well, maybe things will lift, etc. I mean, he had a show in June of 2020. Obviously, that got canceled. We pushed it to September 2020. That got canceled, right? We pushed it to April 2021. That got
Oh my
canceled.
God.
Right? So, and then he eventually just had the show in September 28th of 21. So it was tough. And what we did for him, obviously we understood the constraints there. So we had a relationship, and we was not, obviously trying to charge him for services that he couldn't necessarily use at the moment. So we developed a approach where we focused on email strategy. So although he wasn't having shows, we had like some campaigns via email. We were creating VIP lists for when there was going to be a show and how they can have, first dibs at tickets, etc. So we did that, and he accumulated tons, of these potential customers who he now have. I want to say, it's been, it's been all these months. If I was to look at the data, we probably have accumulated just thousands and thousands, maybe I don't know, 10,000 emails or something. But we have that, and he added to what he already had. And so now, as we're going and we're running now for a show that he has coming up in April, we have so much data that we've accumulated over that time that it actually is making it easier. So it was also great that he, still had the wherewithal to continue doing something opposed to just not doing nothing at all. And then in that same process, we had other clients who, so after March of 2020, we had a tech client that, their funders or their VCs started to pause on, their checks. And so we end up, losing that particular client. So, things, but then we started to get, our demographic started to, become aware of us because we were still visible. We were still in these communities, different things. And we started to get clients that, were paying us, and they still were getting checks because they had the kind of services, products that was conducive to the environment of, say, COVID, for example. So we actually really started to, scale in that sense as we progressed through 20 and, even I want to say this year, 21 was our best year, for sure, by far.
So, since 2020, going back, when did you initially get, like, I guess the VC partnership going, and was that pre 2020? Was that in the midst of 20?
Yep, that was in the midst. It was June of 2020.
Okay, so June of 2020, and you start getting your initial clients, and this is right after, March was kind of the biggest kind of shutdown in all of America, and I mean most of
Yeah.
the world. March, April, May. Um, so what was that initially like? Walk us through the mindset and mentally, where were you guys at? I mean, you were with your business partner, I assume. Um, so
Yes.
talk to us about that.
No, yeah, we were we were in a state of shock too. We were, trying to figure it out. We were like, wow, this is happening. Okay, so this is the situation. What do we do? We were not in a good psychological state because you're in this panic mode. You start this business, you just lost your biggest client that you had. You still have a few clients, but nothing to what you had, and then two, their budget and cost is diminishing because they can't really do what they had hired you to do when you first started. So we were in that state of like, oh man, what we're gonna do. This isn't looking good. Okay, I guess, am I gonna have to go and find a job? Like, I guess I'll just have to start working again in the meantime until things turn around. So those were real challenges and different things that we had to contemplate. But a lot of times people say, what would be your advice to people that are thinking about taking that leap of faith? And I would say, even with the experience we had, I would say yes, do it, because you look at it now and, oh, it's sweet like honey, but it's because you kept going, you kept pushing, you didn't give up, you took that leap of faith and you kept doing the work, and eventually things turn around. So that's why I always like that expression about there's ebbs and flows, right? So you're just gonna have to work within that constraint in some cases, but there's going to be those blossoming months. So that's why you want to, take everything with a grain of salt. But long as you know how to coast, you know how to ride the wave, so to speak, you'll be good.
And when you onboarded your first initial clients, I mean, how like pressured were you guys to get them results pretty quickly, especially in the midst of COVID? And so yeah, kind of walk us through that initial, like, getting your first client after the VC partnership, and now you have to prove to the VCs and pretty much everyone that you can actually provide amazing results.
Absolutely. No, it was great, because another thing is now you're working with people that understand, they have the same mindset as you. They know that, okay, here's what it's going to take. Here's what that looks like. Here's our approach that we're going to apply. So we're very transparent, making we have a process in place, right? Where everyone's in sync, everyone's aligned. And we're in fact, with this particular client, the VC, when he sent us his top, you know, portfolio uh, client, she, within the first 3 weeks of working with her, so when she was working with us, she was losing money like 40% the month prior to working with us, and we increased revenue by 52% within 3 weeks of working with her. And that was just a matter of taking our approach of saying, okay, she had a lot going on within the ad account and so forth. And it's like, okay, we need to consolidate, right? So that's one of the things is, sometimes, and it's because, you're busy doing, again, these high level entrepreneurs or just companies, they're busy doing a lot of different things, but they're also trying to run their own ads. And I understand how time consuming that can be, because that's what I do. And I'm like, I can't imagine doing all of this and trying to run the business. That's like crazy. And so we were able to just consolidate a bunch of different things, apply our approach, our skill set, and add that different perspective to where we turn things around within 3 weeks. And so they were like, so now it's like back to that conversation we had, results cure all. And I like, we talked about, Joe, who we sat down with organically, right? Had breakfast with the other day,
Crazy.
which was just such an amazing conversation. So I actually started reading his book, and he mentions in his book about, we're not looking for thought leaders, but result leaders. And it may be in like a video clip where he said this
Wow.
too. And I was like, that's similar to that expression I've heard about results cure all. So I was like, you know what, that is a great way to put it too. And I like that. I don't want to be a thought leader. I want to be a results leader, so that I have the ability to get results. And then when clients see that, you get rid of all the apprehensiveness, because they know that, okay, this person know what they're doing. They're locked in. They're in there doing the work. They're competent, etc. So, yeah.
No, I love that. That is one thing. And after having talked to you initially, that I got out that you are really results focused, right? And that's something for anyone listening, that might be looking at working with you. This guy is super detail oriented. I mean, the first time we also talked was, you mentioned when you were looking inside of campaigns, even at Facebook, when you were inside an Oreo account or Nike's account, you were looking at the very granular data that a lot of media buyers or performance marketers don't really look at. And so I love that about you, first of all. Kind of maybe give us an example, if you can, whether it's a client that you've worked with, and if you can share any names, and kind of walk us through the process of onboarding them, maybe some challenges they were experiencing and how you were able to turn that around, so people can kind of get an idea of what it's kind of like, whether it's working with you, and maybe even some of the challenges that brands are facing nowadays, and get some insight on that.
Absolutely. There's a client where he has him and his wife, they have an immunity product. And so very I would say fitting
Hmm.
for the current climate,
Right.
right? We talk about COVID. And so their whole approach is, think Dr. Sabi, for example, if anyone is familiar with him. But that whole plant-based, organic-based, eating proper, like preventive care versus like taking medicine and all these different things, like eat to live. So this particular company, they were already doing well, but they had never ran, Facebook ads. They've done some things where like maybe you're boosting a post. I never look at those things as a person that's really know what they're doing
I
or
know.
serious about running ads. Like, okay, they boosted posts. Like, okay, they never really officially ran ads the real way,
Mhm.
as we would say in our industry, like being in the back end of ads manager, using business manager, etc., to house all your assets. And so we, really set up shop for them in that sense. And I think, helping them to understand that, hey, here's why you need to set it up this way. You need to have your business manager and your ad account and your Instagram profile, all these different assets that you have. They need to live here, right? And then two, so I'll talk to this because when I was at Facebook, there were clients who was creating ad accounts or there were agencies that was creating ad accounts for clients. Whereas, so if something go wrong, well, now the agency owns the ad account. And so you would find these situations that was really bad, that you find themselves in a pickle, as some would say. So that was a part of the transparency, that, the value that we have, the integrity that we have, that we wanted to bring to the table, in the sense that, we don't do that. We want to give you the ins and the outs. You never want to do it that way. Even if you don't work with us, any agency that you work with, you want to make sure you have your own ad account, etc. And you want to share that with the agency. So now it'll still show that you're the owner of the account and the agency is just a partner. So you can kick them out at any time. So, anyway, so we educate along the way of this onboarding process that we do with our clients as well. So it's not just, okay, hey, we'll take it from here. It's a, no, we're partnering. Here's why we're doing this. Here's why we're going to create this audience. Here's why we need access to Shopify. Here's how the APIs communicate. Here's the kind of audience we're creating and what it means. Also we go through that whole process of just having that transparency, building that relationship, connecting with them authentically, and then, going from there. So with them, again, they have an immunity-based product, and they had not ran ads the proper way. And so we set everything up for them, but we have weekly calls. That's their cadence. Is like, hey, we're willing to jump on a weekly call with you if necessary. Some clients like, hey, just send us an email weekly and we can, go from there. But whatever your cadence is. And so we get on there. So now with this immunity based product, as we know with Facebook, a lot of times they want to use before and after pictures and different things like this. But Facebook is a stiffler about those kind of images and videos and so forth. And truly, they do work the best. So if they slip through the cracks, so to speak, we've tried one with them and it slipped through, it got past the algorithm and was approved and it was crushing it. And then later Facebook flagged it and disabled it. And they're like, well, why did they do that? We're like, well, it slipped through the crack the first time, but Facebook do go back and review. They can review it again. They send crawlers onto your landing page to see what you're doing over there. So they kind of be, oh, really? I'm like, but so that's why we're there, because we're like, no, we know because we worked at Facebook. This is what they do, and this is how you get disapproved. And so we will always send them the information directly from Facebook to like, hey, look, here's what they said. This is a violation of policy number, whatever, health, etc. But how do we get creative? We let them know, hey, look, this is what we're thinking. Instead of having the before and after picture side by side, what we're going to do is we'll take the before picture down and just have the person talking. And later on in the video, we have that before picture pop up, right? And then go away. And so that was a way that we just implemented that just a few days ago, and it passed and it's been running ever since. So you just got to get creative. But they like that about us, because it's not like we're saying, hey, look, you can't do it, can't run a before and after, and that's just that. No, we're thinking about a solution. What's a workaround in a way in which we can get it passed so that it can, get some results for it.
I like that. Yeah. Because Facebook, there's constant policy updates. I mean, constant things that they're adding into their, I don't know, repertoire of rules that they have for, ad accounts and brands that are looking to run ads.
Mm-hmm.
So it's cool that, especially if you're working with an agency, you want to be working with an agency that knows all of those rules and can kind of be proactive and help you to navigate that. So that's really amazing that you did that for one of your clients.
Absolutely. We have a partnership. We are a partner with Facebook. So we have, we have the reps too. So we don't, like you say, we don't talk to them because we already understand, like, okay, this could be a new person that maybe don't know that much or whatever the case may be. But we do keep in contact just in case. We know that they can put in support tickets, for us. So we always say, don't burn them. You may not want to have those conversations, but you want to keep them, on their good side, because if you do have something pop up, you want to be able to reach out and say, hey, excuse me, can you can you escalate this for us? See if we can get this reapproved, or hey, this thing is happening. What can you share with us around that? You may not need any strategies for them in terms of your ads, but there's other support issues that may pop up that you can utilize them for.
Got it. So I know in our discussions, you've mentioned a few celebrities that you've worked with. Can you talk about any of them and, how you guys initially met and what that entire process has been like, just, working for, a well-known figure, and, what that overall, what the process is like working with someone like that?
Yeah, that's a great segue. I like that. Juan, Street Lord Juan, is what we call him in Detroit, and he's very well known, not only in Detroit but just in the industry. And so, he had been away for a while, but he's back now. And I growing up in Detroit, I have an older brother who's 10 years older than me, so they had a relationship. They kind of ran together and everything like that. And so when he got out or whatever, I reached out to him like, hey, what's going on? Glad you're home, etc. connecting, right? Relationship building. And it was just such, just such a joy, to see someone of his stature. He always been a person that was looking to help others to raise them up and so forth. He just, we would say he showed a lot of love, in the city, Detroit. And so, I reached out to him. We got connected. I flew back home to Detroit in April of this year and met with him. He has his Street Lord radio app that he's putting out and has produced and developed, and I'm heading the growth marketing for that and for him. And he's well connected. He's doing a lot of different things in the industry, with different artists, etc. And so, having that connection has been like a domino effect, if you will. And so I do all that I can to help, far as my expertise as it relates to what he's trying to do. And then of course he's also seen what I'm doing, and he's very like proud of that. Like, wow, man, I'm glad that you're not in the streets and you're doing something positive, and you created a business and all these different things. And so, yeah, official Street Lord Juan. And again, he had the app, Street Lord Radio app, that we're marketing and everything like that. So he's doing some really big things. He has an album coming out, Lord Status 3, that he's been recording. He over at Heaven Studios, Royce the 5'9" is where he's located. So him and Royce, they like brothers. In fact, Royce the 5'9" and Nas, they in EPMD, they just had their concert in Detroit at the Fox Theater, and Royce the 5'9" brought Street Lord Juan out, and so that was Street Lord Juan's first time on stage in like over 10 years since he's been home. So that was great to see. He just looked really happy, and it's just a joy to see him doing his thing. And so I'm proud of that, and love everything that he's doing. So he's one of the key figures I've been working with as well.
That's really cool. I mean, it's kind of goes back to what you went to school for, right? Like it's you studied music, and it's kind of a full circle. Now being able to work with some of the top musicians that you used to look up to. So now as we're getting towards the end of the interview, I would love to kind of talk about where you guys are currently, what you guys are currently doing, maybe some of the clients that you guys are currently working with, and what it's potentially like to work with you as an agency, and on board with you.
Yes, right now we have a nice size portfolio of 12 plus clients, and we're looking to grow right now. So we definitely are looking for clients who are looking to scale, tech startups, founders, or e-com, whatever it may be. Definitely looking to work with those who align, with us, and us with them. So we always, look for partnerships. That's how we view ourselves. We know sometimes like, oh, this is a vendor, but we really like to be an intimate part, play an intimate role with whatever client we're working with, just because we know that it's a lot more to what makes a company successful aside from what's happening in the ad account, right? So we like to really forge those bonds, those relationships, so that we can really, grow together. In fact, like one of our clients that I was talking about with the immunity product flew us out to their home in Atlanta, there, and so that was really cool. And so we just like to have those type of connections. And all of our clients, even our VC partner, we're able to connect with him often online. And so we like to keep those relationships warm, and just have those bond with clients, basically bond with partners, really have that type of feel. And share our experience, because even if you just want to have a conversation with us and maybe it's not a good fit in either way, but I'm sure we can share something that would be valuable. So we're always just trying to add value, add our a different perspective perhaps that they haven't been used to in the marketing agency world. We know how how ugly it can get, sadly. And so, we're those kind of folks where we're like, hey, look, maybe we can work together, but I'm sure we can potentially learn something. And so, yeah, we're looking to scale for 22. Going strong, and some of the things that we're working on right now. For example, even we want to start a Inflect Capital, which will be our investing arm to our agency. So we're also looking to, invest in certain industries, and so that's one thing that we're moving towards. So in late 22, so we're looking to be ready to implement that particular arm as well. So that's something that's on a horizon, as it were.
I like that. I like that. Thanks for sharing, my guy. We're gonna before we wrap the interview, I do want to kind of do a rapid fire with you. So I'll go ahead and ask you some questions, and you can give me, an answer, whether it's super quick, or if you want to maybe explain a little bit on why you chose something particularly. So I'll start with the first question. What advice would you give yourself if you were back in high school about to enter college?
Whew. Really find a counselor a mentor who can give you some real guidance on, what your path is going to look like. Um, you have to seek that help. I know I didn't always do that at a younger age, seek the help that I needed. Um, and so that's what I would, recommend. There's nothing wrong with asking for help, and being open about that, and just, finding those who really care that can give you some guidance in terms of your career path, something that you're really interested in, that you're passionate about. So yeah.
Okay, perfect. Who is someone you look up to in the world of marketing? I know we both shared a conversation with Joe Polish the other day, but is there someone that you just constantly look up to for advice, as you're navigating in this world of, paid social and overall just marketing?
Um, that's a good question. It's quite a few people. That I look at what they're doing. I'll read different blogs to kind of see what people perspectives are on different things. And one that I'll just say I've been meditating on lately is Andrew Chan. And he has a book that he just released it's his first book. It's called the Cold Start Problem. And it's a very interesting, perspective that I feel he brings to the table on that. He talks about growth hacking, how it became popular, um, games in the future of the metaverse, the creator economy. So he's given all these different tips and, insights on, kind of like, where things are headed, so forth and so on. And then, of course, he, was the head of marketing over at Uber, for a time. And so he's one of the persons I've been really kind of like following lately, and just kind of looking at what he's doing, and so forth.
Got it. What's the most inspiring book you've ever read?
Hmm. See, now for this, I'm gonna have to say, now there's so many different books, but I'm gonna go with The Cool Pose by Dr. Richard Majors. And the reason why I chose that book is just because it kind of broke down from a sociologist or psychologist perspective on the mental health challenges of individuals in low income communities like mine that I grew up in Detroit. And so he called it the cool pose. And, with that, it's like you develop these different approaches to handling situations, based on your environment or your experiences that could be mistook for, being, just acting out, or, oh, what's wrong with this person? What's wrong with this child or this youth? When really it may just be, their way of dealing with not having the usual routes to success and esteem, because of where they grew up and their experiences. So he really broke that down in a way that I could understand it, and I was like, oh wow, so that's what the cool pose is, if you will. And so I would, I recommend that. And what's interesting too is that I read that book about a year ago. And I actually just got in contact with him because I was, sending
Oh, wow.
emails trying to figure out a way to get in contact with him. And we actually just had a video chat via WhatsApp on Tuesday of last week. So that was really cool to actually have a conversation with him. And he just was dropping so many different gems during that conversation. And he's working on an app right now that's for young boys and teachers, and how they can interact, how to interact with one another. Because he talked about an interesting thing where it's like with teachers, they may be really quick to just punish like a child, but you don't know what's the context. Did the child did they eat this morning? What are they going through at home? And even with the teacher, are they going through a divorce? Are they easily irritable right now? So all these different things. And so he actually want me to work with him on that. So I just thought that's something that's kind of developing as we speak. But yeah, I would say that. But then during our conversation, because sometimes you could be so focused on the problem that you don't talk about the solution. And so he mentioned that the solution to the cool pose is emotional literacy. As it were, and learning how to deal with things in healthy ways, how to manage your emotions and so forth.
It's very rare to meet your favorite authors, so that's really cool that you got a chance to do that.
Indeed.
What is your favorite childhood memory?
I would say spending time in my grandma's house. Just because that was a time where the family got together, where your cousins, your aunts, your uncles, everyone was together. And so I missed that family communal kind of that feel, and that family that you got, and how you all used to get together different times. And that was my favorite childhood memory, I would say, because we don't have that today, if you will. Like my grandmother, she passed away, and then at that, I feel like in our community, once once that happens, it's like everyone just kind of go off and just do their own thing, and we barely get together. But we do at times, but it just ain't the same as it used to be. So I would say, yeah, that's my favorite childhood memories at my grandma's house.
What would your friends say your biggest strength is?
Interesting. I've asked this question, and I know some things that had came out was like writing has been one of them, which makes sense because I've done a lot of writing over the years, and then also relationship building, connecting with others, kind of like networking, that kind of thing.
hmm
Um, those are some of the things that
If you could
stood
spend
out.
a day with anyone in the world currently living, who would it be?
Mm, man.
I know I'm putting you on the
Yeah, yeah,
spot.
yeah. I know that's a tough. I always want to use two people because it's like I wanna like sit down with someone from the biblical
Yeah.
era, like a King David or somebody, because I was even reading, the book of Psalms this morning. So chapter 31 through 35 is what I was like meditating on. So I'm like, it would be interesting to sit down with him and just really just the things that he was saying. I can feel like what he was probably dealing with, like those deep feelings that you have. And so I would want to sit down and talk with him. But if we're talking about like outside of the biblical era, I would say Tupac Shakur.
Tupac Shakur. And what about someone that's currently living?
Currently living, I would say, let's see here. Dr. Greg Carr. He's a professor at Howard University. I would love to sit down and talk with him.
Like,
And that's actually on my to-do list. Just like we saw Joe the other day, like I'm waiting for the time I'm walking or going through the airport and I see Dr. Greg Carr. Oh man, I'm gonna lose it. Like, oh, I gotta talk to this guy.
hey, you're manifesting it, man. It's gonna happen.
For sure.
Last question. What does success mean for you, or what does it look like?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
What does success mean for you, or what does it look like?
Success looks like, where you have that strong sense of control in all areas of your life, family, personal, business wise. Everything is operating in a way that you're in, like what maybe you heard the expression, you're in that flow state. Now, of course, again, you have your ebbs and flows, and nothing is perfect, but overall, that pattern should be one that is positive, and it's like the relationships that you have are positive. Your success looks like being grateful. Success looks like having that appreciation, that gratitude, that generosity toward others. All of those things are what success looks like, to me. That your relationships are good. You got, positive habits. Your family life is, where it should be. So not just your public life, but also your private life. And so in whatever those areas that what I've been, for me personally, looking at, okay, what area can I work on? We all should be always looking to grow in some way or another. And so for me, I look at those different areas of my life and say, okay, where can I do better? I started to create a schedule, for example, on my Google Calendar. I have different notifications that will pop up to say, hey, take a break, go spend time with your family, go do this, because sometimes you get so caught up in you're working. I got a 5-year-old daughter, and I've been married for 7 years. And so I have to, keep everything in its proper place.
I like that, man. It's very true. You have to look at your life so holistically. It's not just business, it's your personal life, and occasionally, even looking at the lives of the people around you, the people that matter the most. So, Lionell, my guy, I really appreciate you for being on. It's been so great to get to know you, especially over the last, honestly, month or two. So thanks for being on. And yeah, my guy, appreciate you. If you're a business or tech startup that is looking to scale and wants to learn more about Lionell and how he's scaling multiple brands to 7 and 8 figures through paid advertising, feel free to contact his agency, Inflect Digital, at inflectdigital.com. You can follow Lionell on Twitter and Instagram at LBTheConnector.
Thanks for listening to Breaking It Down with Yogin Patel, your one-stop shop for business success and personal growth. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. Share with a friend if you found value in today's episode. And for more information or to connect with Yogin, subscribe to our newsletter and check out Yogin on Instagram and TikTok at YoginPat. We'll see you next time.